the new parable of truth and lies for Ascension. There was a time when the truth walked freely among the people, and the people adored the truth accordingly. For the truth told them where to find the freshest water to drink, where the ripest fruits were to eat, and when the storm was coming, where to seek the best shelter. But, truth be told, these were the early days of humanity, when simple survival was enough to earn everyone's gratitude, and the same words of truth were effective for all. Humans were not far from their cousin apes, and truth was revered and obeyed as instinct. Then came the day that truth had long feared, when humans were ready to test their free will. Truth gathered the people together and said, "Behold, I reveal to you now that I am not one truth, but many, for each of you has your own truth to follow." And truth split like a rainbow into the many truths of one light, each with subtly different hues for each person to follow. At first, the people could not perceive any difference, so it mattered not who followed whose truth. Over time, however, the people began to build villages and seek different professions. This caused great confusion whenever someone followed the wrong truth for them. Disharmony and arguments arose as the truths ran back and forth in distress, seeking to be properly heard. Some truths stumbled and fell, became injured and disrespected, leading to new, sadder truths of competition and war. To help dispel the suffering of humanity, the earth called on the sun to shine brighter upon each person's truth. The expectation was that everyone would now see that their own proper truth had some of their own features and values, even as human individuals were becoming more distinct with favorite emotions and expressive styles. For some of the people this worked well, but many more became further confused and challenged. They looked down in shame to find a simpler, darker leader to follow, there in the stark silhouettes on the ground. Soon the shadows ruled, as people discovered that the opposite of a bright, lively truth is a flat, featureless lie that no one can fully own or deny. The people became accustomed to chasing the shadows on the ground and feeling powerful to jump up and down on more lies. Some even sought to live in the shadows always, which caused them to grow sickly and twisted in their ways. This was unfortunate, because the truths continued to grow tall and strong as they must, to show the great destiny still in store for all who would look up someday. The truths became sad to be so misconstrued, but in the light of a bright future, they could not stop casting their shadows, which the ignorant could worship and follow to their own destruction. So it is that a truth will always be paired with a contrasting lie that, like a shadow on the ground, is all too easy for the low and downcast to chase after and gossip about. But for those who have the courage to raise their own sights of expectation and gaze their own truth in the eye, a great friend is waiting to show you the way to the stars. Hi, my name is Carl Johann Schroeder. I am the artist, the creator of that new parable of truth and lies for the Ascension. Otherwise, I'd like to call it Ordo Viriditas. I will explain more what that means. The play of growth, the play of growth. So I'm going to talk about sort of an artist commentary. There's going to be philosophy. There's going to be art. There'll be guidelines for how to better design your own metaphors, your own meanings for life, because that is the real power of your consciousness. You got to understand, we need to understand in these ascension times, that's what's going on. The people who would lose out, The people who will lose out are the people who aren't willing to take charge of their reality, what it means to them, and create images and stories and mythologies for their own personal growth. So let's start with what inspired me to make this new parable. I came across the fact that in the 19th century, in the 1800s, a fable for truth and lies was very popular and was illustrated, painted by a number of artists. And the fable goes like this, that truth and lies were friends, and they go swimming one day in a well. For part of the reason I will explain that they were inspired partly by the Greek philosopher Democritus, who spoke of truth as being, well, nobody knows about truth because truth is at the bottom of a well. So there's this well imagery, and truth and lies are friends. They go swimming. So truth takes off her clothes, and while she's swimming in the well or the pond or wherever, lies steal her clothes. And when truth comes out, sees that her clothes are gone and left with the scrappy, ugly clothes of the lies. So truth is not going to clothe itself in lies. So the truth remains naked, and lies are running around the world looking very pretty in the garments of truth. And the naked truth is, people shun it, people are embarrassed. And so it's a pretty good metaphor for certain things. So you think about what a metaphor is. A metaphor is when you compare two things, and it's important to realize the ways in which a metaphor helps you to think about something that's more abstract. So the ways in which it is like that, but you also got to realize, like, nothing is exactly something else. So there are also limits to the metaphor. How is the metaphor not helpful? So my immediate reaction to this fable of the truth and lies was like, what are we talking about? Truth and lies are friends? Why would they be friends? And why would truth and lies be of equal footing? They're both people. And yeah, I like the part about lies steal the look of truths. But then that's what lies are in the first place. Lies are, they're pretty lies where they flatter you, and then they're the ugly lies that try to scare you. But either way, lies are lies. So I wanted a parable. I want a fable, an allegory that had more of the symbolism of how I really see truth and lies, because I've done a lot of work in understanding belief systems, and that is a big part of what's going on in the Ascension times on Earth. The reason why humanity has struggled so much is because it has been living under the yoke, under the burden of false belief systems, false negative beliefs. Think about what that means. They're false, they're not true. They're beliefs about how life works, but it's not true, and it's negative, it's going to hurt you, and that is what has made people suffer. A classic example would be that war would lead to peace. War is never going to lead to peace, and yet so many cultures are so invested, and they're into the pretty lies of war would lead to peace, of that, oh, we'll have a wonderful, peaceful world someday. All you have to do is like become an ugly, killer and kill all the bad guys. And once you get rid of the bad guys, you won't be a bad guy, because it's all the lies justify themselves. They flatter you. Lies turn you into the kind of thing that you're opposed to. So basically, it's a lot like the dictators and the demigods and the narcissists these days. You see these people, they say like, oh, somebody's out to get you. Follow me. I'll tell you what to do. And you're like, oh my God, I'm so scared. Okay, you tell me what to do. And then over time, you start realizing like, wait a minute. Life was not out to get me like the liars said. And the liars are the ones that are creating the problems. So this is what we need to understand, that consciousness runs on belief systems. There are false negative beliefs that will basically scare you and cow you into following them, into obeying them, and to obey anybody who uses negative beliefs against you. And it creates its own problems, and you'll go down a path where the world ends. Basically, you get a world where full of wars, pollution, domination, cruelty, poverty, disease, etc. So, the stuff that we see in the world today. And true positive beliefs do exist, absolutely. And true positive beliefs are the ones that connect you with the facts of the universe, how life really works. How life really works, Peace leads to peace, okay? War is never going to lead to peace. Even if you ever had a war where you got rid of all the bad guys, as soon as another conflict comes up, everybody's bracing for the next war. Well, the only way we know how to solve a conflict is to have a war. It's like, no, peace leads to peace. You've got to start practicing peaceful, truthful, kind, effective ways of living, and those will grow and develop, and that's what leads to success. It's kind of like, the lies are saying, go south, and someday you will go north. Maybe that's not the best metaphor because the earth is round and it will circle around. But basically lies are saying, like, go in the wrong direction and then someday you'll realize it was the right direction. No, the wrong direction will never turn into the right direction. You have to turn around. You have to see the lies for what they are, and you will drop them and disbelieve them. So this fable of truth and lies, the good thing about it, the metaphor works in terms of, oh, that's kind of cool. It's saying how people are afraid of the naked truth, meaning the brutal truth, the fact, facing how things really are, even if it's ugly. But to understand the truth is to set you free. Like, now I know what can be done. Now I know what really works. Now I know what's going on. So I was excited to make a new parable. I wanted to include some of the concepts that I really live for and by, the work I've done with my spirit guides guiding me, how to understand belief systems, and how belief systems are a flag, a trait of evolving humanity, that humanity learns to master the belief system. So I generated created this new parable. And yes, I illustrated it with AI-generated images. And by the way, of course, I don't mean all humanity to be white, Caucasian. That's just what the AI was generating. But obviously, where I talk about early humanity, they would look more African, dark skin. But the point is, the fable, I am including I'm clarifying my values with regard to understanding truth and lies. So the concept that truth is real. Truth is a wonderful being who will guide you to a successful life. So in the beginning, the humans who are early humans, who are close to animals, they just follow their instincts. The truth of nature is that it will guide you to a successful life in your ecosystem. But early on, humans and any sentient creature like humans develops free will. And there's nothing wrong with animals. They play, they think, they love, they aspire, they have dreams, they have thoughts and feelings, but animals don't particularly have free will. It's certain level of self-awareness when you start noticing that I could change the rules, that I don't have to always do the first thing that comes to me intuitively, that I could try other things. That's the value, the power of free will, but also the curse of free will. You have to be careful. You're starting to invent new things. You might really mess yourself up like humanity has. So I wanted my parable to show clearly that humanity starts with these beautiful truths that guide them to live well in the ecosystem. And then at some point, the truth is that humans are going to develop free will. And this is the great step of individuation. Now human beings can really express themselves individually and start pursuing lifestyles, vocations, and fascinations and passions that didn't come pre-programmed with evolution. And so this is where the truth in my parable, dreading the day when free will need to announce that, hey, every one of you has your own truth to follow. And yes, there are relative truths and there are absolute truths. And I am in no way like advocating like making up truth, making up what would work. No, there's a background truth of life. We need to adhere to what really works in life. And then you can have relative truths within the greater truth of a living ecosystem, a living society, where people have diversity and harmony and they help each other discover and explore their passions. Then you can have truths of like, this person wants to be a park ranger, this person wants to be a dentist, this person wants to be a parent, this person wants to be a leader, an artist, a scientist, so on. And so what's true for you isn't necessarily true for me. But of course, we're going to agree on the basics of human survival. So I am not suggesting people who just completely fantasize and make up things that end up being cruel and dysfunctional. That's okay. No, those are just the lies. And so every person develops a truth to follow. And at first, human beings, they're all kind of, like we're still basic human beings that we can follow the same truths. But over time you individuate and it starts becoming confusing. Like your parents saying you got to follow in your ancestors' footsteps, and it's like, no, I'm different. I'm going to follow I've got a new passion, I've got a new profession, I've got a new calling. And I totally believe in destiny. We have arranged our lives from higher levels of truth. And people need to follow their passions, and that needs to be respected and supported in society. Get away from things like these caste systems that say, okay, a little diversity, you're always going to be a loser and you're always going to be this. And no, every human being, you have incredible gifts to share. You need to follow your passions. And if people aren't supporting you, if they don't understand your dreams, that's okay. Your truth will guide you. Your truth will set you free. So then in my parable, we've got the people, they become confused, and there are conflicts in the early stages of individuation where people are trying each other's truths, and some things fit and some things don't, and leads to conflict and even war, and the new truths that people are able to follow lies and hurt each other. So then this idea of that the earth wants you to be a higher being with free will. The earth, I firmly believe that humans are very much a part of nature. Even if it becomes our nature to go against nature, that's still part of nature. So this earth calls upon the sun to shine more brightly on each person's truth, and for hopefully the people to notice your truth looks like you. Because this is getting into the concept of there are higher selves. We have higher dimensional, greater beings of ourselves who are guiding us to develop our talents and our gifts. And we will become more and more the higher beings on the earth, grounded souls and bodies. But with increasing sunlight, increasing contrast, the fact is that there will always be opposite of a truth. There will be, well, you could go the other direction. It quickly sucks. I mean, a lie, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't lead to a good life. It's like it hurts you. So this is where I'm going with a classic representation of the opposite of a truth is a lie that's really just like a shadow. So I'm getting away from the 19th century fable that said, truth and lies are friends of equal strength and whatever, and they're both human beings. No, it's like the truth is a human being, is a great human being, an aspiration, who you want to become, to be more of who you really are, a divine being, a creator in the creation. And the lies are just shadows. They're just contrast. Like, you should be able to feel and see that, crawling around on the ground following shadows, that's no way to live. And yet that's the way a lot of people live. And so we get this culture of people have built a whole society, and there are people who live in the shadows to create whole lifestyles of like trumping up fears and getting people to follow them and all these lies, when at any time, you as the individual, with your own truth, with your own higher self to guide you, you can look upward, you can look to the stars, and you can ask your truth to uplift you and raise your thinking with positive beliefs. You can let go of the traumas, the ongoing traumas of lies. It's not just traumas of the past. Yes, we have memories of terrible things that happened in childhood and whatever, and people keep walking around in PTSD and thinking like, oh my God, my subconscious is my enemy. I keep remembering these things that paralyze me. No, you have ongoing trauma from the false beliefs that you're believing. The competition, the domination, the lies, that you're not good enough, that somebody else has powers that you don't, and you have to suck up to them or please them or dominate them or intimidate them or whatever. All of these lies to get out of that lifestyle. And any time you can follow your passions, you can believe in yourself, and your truth will lead you to a whole new level of consciousness. That's symbolized by looking to the stars. So I want to talk a little more about the history of that I'm giving you right away. Is that's the point. That's what I wanted to express in my new parable. But like I said, in the 19th century, this fable of truth and lies going swimming, and lies steals truth's clothes, and the naked truth is now shunned by people. So there are precedents where, so as I mentioned, the Greek philosopher Democritus, from 460 to 370 BC, he was called the laughing philosopher because he was known for valuing cheerfulness. He had a statement of truth we know nothing, for truth is in a well. And actually the original Greek was more like not a well but an abyss, but it became a well, and that fits the metaphor too, because sooner or later you are thirsty, your body needs something to drink, your soul, your spirit needs truth to drink, so you will go to the well of truths. You will meet the truth. The idea of truth being naked, the naked truth, that's been an expression for a long time. The Roman poet Horace, from 65 BC to about 8 BC, he was famous for the phrase carpe diem, seize the day, but he also had like nuda veritas, the naked truth. So veritas means truth. And, a number of playwrights use the phrase naked truth. Shakespeare, of course, he's so brilliant and would do a lot of punning. He, in Love's Labour's Lost, around 1594, the character declares, the naked truth of it is I have no shirt. So it's a pun of like the truth of it, and he literally is naked. And so he popularized that expression of the naked truth. But then it really becomes big in the 1800s, 19th century. So that's like this romanticism in painting. They're reaching back to a lot of classical kind of allegories and symbolism, and they're going to paint it lushly, beautifully. And so you get there was a whole school of French painters who painted versions of this naked truth. And so, of course, like it's kind of the irony of like supposedly nobody wants to see the naked truth, but of course everybody wants to see the French male painters painting a naked woman who's supposed to be truth. So one of her symbols in a lot of these paintings is that she's holding a mirror, which I think is really cool. It's the symbolism of awareness can reflect itself. I mean, this goes back to the concept of the void and the ultimate goal of meditation, the bliss of objectless consciousness, that you can be aware of your own awareness. It's a truth that you always exist. When you get to that, because you always have a certain level of insecurity. If your consciousness of your existence, you think it depends on there being objects. But when you have an experience of that objectless consciousness, I exist even when there is nothing. I am just able to reflect upon myself. So it's neat that the truths in these paintings, so show you some of the paintings here. A main one was Jean-Léon Gérôme. He did like 4 versions of it. There's one of truth coming out of her well with a whip to chastise humanity. So, people have color it with their different senses of, another one, he showed truth like laying dead in the well. And his title was The Nurturer of Truth Lies in a Well, Having Been Killed by Liars and Actors. And then a couple more of just truth is in the well, looking at her mirror. A number of other artists inspired by him. I could try saying these French names right. French, Edouard de Bas-Ponsan, Jules Arsène Garnier, who studied under Jérôme, Jules Joseph Lefebvre, and Paul-Jacques Aimé Baudry. And then there were some non-French artists too. There was the Irish artist George William Joy. He's got his truth there, and Ferdinand Hodler, Swiss, and then the German Gustav Klimt. They all had their fun of portraying the naked truth. So there's sort of the art history there. But as I said, like I had an immediate reaction of, I want to do something to make it more clear, because it's my life mission to help people, starting with myself. I needed help to get beyond this, some idea of like that lies, and the things that scare us are somehow equal in footing to the truth. No, the truth is, the truth immediately sets you free. You feel better right away, and you see the direction, and you're connecting with the universe, and you get your passions, and you're clear-headed, and you're connecting with your future self and your higher self. It's beautiful. And lies, just immediately, you start shutting down, you start getting paranoid and scared. There's just no comparison. So, as I said, I thought of like, what would be a good metaphor here? And a friend of mine, he really likes, telling parables too. And so I was telling him this, and he said like, oh, I get it. Like maybe truth is like a mountain and lies are like the wind blowing around the mountains. Like, this is pretty good. Yeah. But so I went with shadows, because I wanted the truths to actually end up being like these divine light beings that you can follow, and they will lift you up to beyond the truth of belief systems. Belief systems are connecting you with, there's an actual universe to know. There's an actual living, loving universe. We are actual higher dimensional beings who are guiding our human selves to wake up, and then we can be the creator in the creation. So I went with the shadows. And of course, as soon as my intuition says go with shadow, it's like, oh, lots of connotations here. So in my Christian upbringing, there's the valley of the shadow of death from Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me. And then people speculate, what's the symbolism of rod and staff? Often like, the kundalini, your spine, or something like that. But anyway, the valley of the shadow of death. The valley, so that's the world where people are afraid of death. And the fear is false. Fear, by the way, is your friend. I mean, dictators and narcissists, they use fears against you, and that's why they have to keep piling on the lies, because fears are actually your friend who are saying there's a false belief. Stop. You can't go much further without fishing out, getting to the root of a false belief. And that's why people who, I will fear nothing, I'll keep plowing ahead. And they just become more and more bullheaded and crazed with lies and the kind of conspiracy theories. It's like, no, you really need to ferret out the lies by letting fear be your friend. And when your fear is your friend, when you're like, hey, hooray, I feel a fear, let's find the lie, the power of dictators is gone. The power of your own dictator, the part of your consciousness that is like a devil, like playing, a survival self. And I'll say more about that. But so yeah, getting beyond the shadow of the lies of death. There is no death. There is eternal consciousness, the awareness looking at its own reflection. There's the connotation of the Greek philosopher Plato. In his work Republic from 375 BC, he has the very famous allegory of the cave. So he set up a situation where, and this is so much like the movie The Matrix, okay? And yes, I'll say a little bit about what I think of the Matrix movies, because it really inspired a lot of people with classical ideas, but at the same time, the hyperviolence, the paranoia, the endless, horrible world, nightmare world, those are all lies. But yeah, the allegory of the cave, if you haven't heard of it, it's that Socrates is telling Plato's own brother in Plato's story, imagine a cave where these people have been chained and they have like a chain around their neck and a chain around their legs. They can't move. They're forced to always look to the back of a cave where behind them a fire representing like a dim consciousness, rather than like the sun of the outside world, but a fire within the cave is casting shadows. And there's a parade of people behind the viewers, the symbol bearers, the sign bearers. They're carrying objects, and it's like a puppet play, a shadow puppet play. they're carrying objects. And so the people who are chained and forced to see the shadows on the back of the cave, they think that's real life. And of course, they're only seeing like, distorted shadows. And then the sign bearers, these people who are carrying the objects, they call out things, the names of the objects, but the people seeing them in the cave, they hear the words reflected on the back of the cave, so they think the shadows themselves are talking. So it's a whole parable of how you could be living this whole shadow life, and you've become so accustomed to it that it would be painful and terrifying to go out into the sunlight, to leave the cave and go out in the sunlight. And Socrates speculates on that, how painful it would be. But if somebody gets used to going to the bright sunlight in the outside world and like, oh my God, our whole life was just shadows of the real world, how joyful they would be once they get used to it. And then, but the challenge they would face to try to go back in the cave and convince people, like, you can leave. And people don't want to leave. And this, you immediately relate to this, anybody who's had, it doesn't even have to be like a spiritual awakening, but just anytime you have a great idea and you're so inspired and you can feel it, like your truth is guiding you, saying, this is possible, this is needed, this is your gift to the world. And other people are like, that's crazy, don't do it, it's not going to work. And they're just really just speaking for the old false belief systems that are trying to discourage you from ever following your truth. So you could have a further parable, like the shadows do kind of talk to you and discourage you and try to get you to not follow your truth. But anyway, so the allegory of the cave from Plato, and another connection would be that also in the 1800s there was this amazing milestone book called Flatland. Many people have known of it. Flatland, A Romance of Many Dimensions, a satirical novel by Edward Abbott, published in 1884. And it's a comment on society, but it's all geometric allegory. And it's noticing how the shadow of a three-dimensional object creates a flat shadow on a flat surface. What if you had a whole society of flat shapes? Could you imagine, and then it became this Victorian armchair exercise to imagine like mechanical systems, biological systems, could they exist in two dimensions? But then you get these really neat, extensions of the metaphor. It's like, okay, so a 3D object casting a shadow on a 2D plane. Now, if the 3D object then intersects the plane, so if you're a two-dimensional creature and your whole life is just seeing, this horizon, something entering your world would be like a sphere crossing your plane of sight would just be a point, and then it would become larger, and then it would shrink again as the sphere goes through. So a lot of people have a lot of fun using this to extend the metaphor of imagining what would 4 dimensions, 4 spatial dimensions, not time, but 4 spatial dimensions. What would that be like? So a hyper sphere would appear, its shadow in our 3-dimensional world intersecting with our world would be a point, and then mysteriously just floating in the middle of the room, this ball grows and then shrinks again. So there is real mathematical validity to imagining 3-dimensional objects and shadows, and this connects with the whole idea of higher dimensional thinking in spirituality, and in some ways it's a metaphor, in some ways it's literal. So, and it's really interesting that there are a number of properties that you wouldn't necessarily expect which topologists and mathematicians have to work out. But the principles of knots, that in 3D, you move to 4 dimensions, a knot would untangle. You can't have the same kind of knots. But in 4D, you can have entire 2-dimensional sheets create knots, which is very hard to, or impossible to imagine. But anyway, all of that kind of stuff. And I wanted to say a little bit about the Matrix movies. So yeah, the Matrix movies coming straight from that Plato's cave kind of thing. What if your entire life, it really appeals to paranoia, right? That there's a conspiracy, and that there is a conspiracy of false belief systems, But most people who are, in the throes of false belief system, they're experiencing the damage to themselves. There is not some real coordinated conspiracy of people trying to keep you in Plato's cave, keep you enchained, keep you crawling on the ground with them, looking at the shadows. Just stand up. It's like, no, I'm not going to chase shadows with you guys. So, but the Matrix movies, I had a strong reaction to the Matrix movies. Like, on one hand, it's like, oh, that's really cool. They're updating with virtual reality the idea of like that this world could somehow be a shadowy place, and that there's a real higher dimension. But then it's a negative Matrix portrayed in the movies because they wake up out of sort of this ordinary life only to find that the real world is a hell of machines controlling the humans and an ongoing war and a war for peace and all these lies and hyperviolence and like, awful. But a very important principle in setting yourself free from belief systems is to let there be a negative and a positive version of everything. So the negative matrix is one where you think life is normal and then you wake up to find it's a hell. That's the negative matrix. There's a positive matrix where you think life is hell and you wake up and you find it's heaven. It's amazing. And that there is a real positive matrix. And I experienced it in other videos. I talk about how in my 40s, I had a whole series of lucid dreams of waking up in the higher dimensions. And they would say, my partner said, we were at a college, basically taking turns incarnating. And she'd be like, oh, great, you woke up. A lot of people just stay back in the dorm room, quote unquote. It's all sort of metaphorical. But no, I was one of the ones who was waking up intermittently. And she showed me the reality creation device. It's sort of a machine room with a little chamber that I enter to go to sleep when I wake up in the morning. And the higher dimensional world is a paradise. It's all about love. It's all about understanding life systems. And that is why spirituality is so high-minded. The word spirituality, people get turned off of spirituality. It's like, well, yeah, let's use a different word. How about just like, the way things work, energetics, the life systems, the way life really works. That's what spirituality is. And the reason why it brings in so many ideals and high-minded experiences is because the way life really works is the universe is alive and it loves you. And you are an eternal consciousness who can create beautiful, beautiful dreams from the world of spirit. We're always in spirit. We're always in our consciousness. And hell is just a nightmare in heaven. You can wake up out of your hells, wake up out of the negative matrix, and be in the positive matrix where it's like, aha, I've mastered belief systems. I've mastered the art of dreaming. Let's now, my spiritual friends and I, let's create beautiful dreams. Let's have heaven on earth. That's the positive matrix, and that is real. So what else I wanted to say is, this is where it gets interesting. So my passions in life, when I hear about a parable of truth and lies, some people would be like, oh, that's cool. But I'm like, oh my God, I've got to jump on that. I've got to improve it. I've got to, use it to help wake people up. This is my passion. This is my soul. And decades ago, I discovered, I won't go into the whole story. I've talked about it elsewhere, but I discovered that another incarnation of my soul, in classical terms, people talk about reincarnation in past lives. So technically, it's not a past life. It's a parallel concurrent life. But another incarnation of me, another version of me in the 12th century is Hildegard of Bingen, a famous German polymath, kind of an odd word, but many talents, really into music, into writing stories and allegories and decoding the symbolism of the Bible and philosophy of how best to live your life and all the stuff that I'm passionate about in my life. I didn't discover this until my 30s, but it totally explained my life, and it gave me courage to keep going forward with my spirituality because I was doubting myself in my 30s. Maybe I should just put aside all this stuff that most people don't want to hear, all this philosophizing, and just get good at making money and learn to love my day job. And then Hildegard comes to me. It's like, no, this is who we are. You got to do this. So Hildegard of Bingen, many of you haven't heard of her, the many who have heard of her are totally offended by the idea of somebody claiming to be another incarnation of that soul. It's like, well, part of that, I've made videos about this too. Christianity is just biased against reincarnation, and it's so unnecessary. There were simply early decisions in the church thinking that, well, if you think reincarnation, you always have another chance, you would just slack off. And no, it really works the other way around. If you realize that, like, I'm going to keep living the same problems over and over, I want to fix them. So Hildegard is known for an early morality play, kind of really like one of the first operas, called the Ordo Virtutum, which means the play of the virtues. So this is a very classical idea of like personifying virtues. That's what this 19th century truth fable is about, is personifying truth and lies. And so, it's a very classical tradition of personifying virtues. So Hildegard made a play for her abbey of nuns. It's really cool. She had the different nuns play different roles of different virtues, and presumably, understandably, each nun is getting a virtue. The queen of the virtues is humility. Humility, to realize, like, we are divine beings. We aren't as awful as we thought. We aren't necessarily as great as our egos may think. We're something transcendent, amazing. We need to keep learning about ourselves. So the queen of the virtues is humility. And then many other virtues like chastity, hope, innocence, discretion, patience, wisdom, obedience, faith, and so on. And it's like, presumably these were all roles to help the nuns who played this. And so there's a wonderful movie called Vision, and I'll be showing some scenes from that, that of this Ordo Virtutum. It was composed around 1151 during the construction and relocation of Hildegard's Abbey. She had lived her life under the thumb of this male abbot, and this stultifying place, and she had to buck a lot of conventions, and she really went close to the edge of heresy and being condemned and all, but she made friends in high places too, all the way up to the Pope, Eugene III. And so long story short, she makes this virtue, the play of the virtues. And it's really neat. So basically, the play is that there are all these virtues, these virtuous qualities, ideals of our human personalities in the higher dimensions in the heavens. And the prophets and the saints understand these virtues, and then a soul incarnates into the world. And in the world is full of souls who are feel trapped in their bodies, and they complain they just can't wait to get out of here. And I have to tell you, that was one of my pet peeves. It still is all my life, long before I found out that I was Hildegard. It's like people like complaining about life and want to get out of here. I can't wait for this to be my last incarnation. It's like, why? Earth is so beautiful, so amazing. Nature is so amazing. We need to work with the divine order, with nature, and restore this garden, this beautiful life. God wants us to be beautiful and have pleasure and have wonderful, fertile, abundant lives. So that's absolutely Hildegard's philosophy and my philosophy. So her parable, Ordo Virtutum, is that a soul incarnates into the world and sees all these other people complaining about how bad the world is, and the soul just wants to get the heck out of there fast. And the virtues of heaven, the higher dimensional beings guiding the soul, they say, no, sorry, you have to stay there. You have to work your way through the world. Which is funny. It's totally what happened to me when I had a spiritual awakening after college. And I didn't want to leave the world, but I just wanted to imagine oh my God, people will wake up and we're going to have the most wonderful life. And I quit my job, and I just wanted to talk about how wonderful God is and the living, loving universe. And no, my guide said, Carl, we woke you up so that you would go through life. You're going to have to go through life. Decades of going through life. So I feel very much like Hildegard's soul in the world. So the soul goes through the world in Hildegard's morality play, which is sung, it's musical, beautiful. and becomes increasingly tempted by the devil. So the devil is a being in her play. But what's interesting, everybody sings. The virtues sing, the soul sings. The only creature who cannot sing is the devil, because the devil has no place. Lies have no place in the divine harmony. It's very easy to tell a lie. It just screams and it shouts and it insults people, and that's what the devil does in this play. Played most likely, I believe, by a male friend of Hildegard's, her secretary Volmar. So anyway, so the virtues sing to the soul on earth what heaven is like with all the ideals of heaven, and meanwhile the devil is shouting and insulting and trying to intimidate and to tempt the soul away from a divine path of its own destiny. And the soul chooses the virtues of heaven, and then the virtues come and they bind up the devil so it can no longer tempt and mislead people. So that's this beautiful parable of the Ordo Virtutum. So my version, my parable, okay, it's not a full composition, and there's just simply some AI generated pictures and some music I got from a free music site, but I think it's beautiful. I wept a lot looking at it, creating it. And so I like to call the Ordo Viriditas, which would mean the play of the greening. Viriditas literally it means, it's Latin for greening. It's a term and a whole philosophy of Hildegard's, which basically the power of life, the power of growth, of fecundity, of blooming, of blossoming, something that I feel very strongly for. And so to me, this new parable for the Ascension, that is the blossoming of consciousness with truths of heaven, and that we will each become our own higher being, resemble more and more our own soul in the world, and our higher being will guide us to look to the stars. We will be meeting our ET friends as well as angels and guides and spirits and nature spirits on earth, and life is just pure magic, pure magic. So I think I've covered about all my points. I could say a little bit more about this idea of the devil. So I talk about this in a lot of other places. The devil, what it comes from, it's your human self that feels abandoned in the world with the lies that scare it. And you become this sociopath just out to survive. It's just raw survivalism. The negativity of people is just raw survivalism. And you notice people become really nasty, really self-preserving, and justifying it all. I felt attacked. I got to attack back. And the lies, they get to push your buttons and provoke you. And going back to I was saying about Jung, the shadow work. Yeah, I wanted to say a little more about that. So Carl Jung, he had this concept of shadow work. So he's using also the idea of a shadow to mean the parts of your behavior that are unconscious. You don't know why you do what you do, but be brave. Look at your triggers. Look at where you lose control. Look at what kind of traumas of childhood seem to be perpetuated. Take charge of the unknown parts of yourself. Going back to the Greek temple, the oracle at Delphi, the temple said, know thyself. And there were actually a number of guidelines on that temple, but know thyself is the one that really people know and has echoed through the ages. Although it's interesting to note that know thyself back then used to be more like know your place, stay in your place, know your station in society. Whereas these days, know yourself means more like know your unlimited individuation potential. So it's going with that sense of evolution, that people will have their individual truths, and you are meant to exceed the limitations that you were raised in. So that the shadow work of Jung, but it's interesting, Jung also said, shadow doesn't have to be your ugly stuff. It could also be amazing, beautiful things about you. So there's a sense of a dark shadow, but there's also a light shadow, which is kind of difficult to include in a parable metaphor. But the light being itself of your truth, but your light shadow is the the amazing divine being, the incredible power of your consciousness, which people are scared of fully claiming. Why would you be scared of being an amazingly powerful, creative, loving being who could make your life beautiful? Because the thing is, yes, you create your own reality, and you already have. You need to take ownership of where you're already at. And if you have a bunch of judgments of saying like, well, anybody who did this should be punished and this and that, then, judge not lest you be judged. Those punishments are going to come back at you. So a lot of people are afraid of waking up because they got a boatload of hate and blame for somebody who's in charge, and find out, wait a minute, I'm the one in charge, then I have to take all of my hate and blame? Like, yeah, so nibble it, do your shadow work, or, wrestling with your demons, or vastations, or what's another one? St. John of the Cross talked about, the dark night of the soul. So it's a classic part of spiritual awakening that you need to go back through your junk. You open the closet, lift up the rug and see why the rug was so lumpy. There's a bunch of stuff that was swept under the rug. But you do your work to face your stuff, and it's finite. You clean it up. You got a finite number of false beliefs that have been messing up your life, and you can convert them. You can change to the positive beliefs that led through your truth and the divine beings, because the positive beliefs, they lead to actual beings. That's why I like in my parable the play of growth, that you've got these beautiful divine beings, that you really do have a soul family. You really do have higher dimensional beings and friends, and you are among them, a higher you. The positive truths aren't just they aren't just beliefs. They're what is actually true. Whereas the negative beliefs, they're false. They just lead you down this path of the devil being, religion is just early psychology. The devil is the narcissist, this sociopathic, pathological liar, always using people, and has no empathy, no feeling for other people, no feeling for themselves. Everything is just an object to be used to maximize some crass, shallow metrics of life success, like whoever has the most money, or whoever has the most followers, whoever, it's like, that's the devil, or the negative ego in psychology, where your ego is your human self, but your negative ego is your abandoned human self, where you refuse to think about following your truth, and you just crawl around on the ground following the shadow of lies. You become that survivalist, brutal, self-preserving creature. In politics, it's the fascist. Fascism is government that just exists to get people to hate each other, to be the last one alive. Fascism isn't just a government of, a monarchy or authoritarianism. It's actually out to kill people. It actually takes pleasure in the belief that everybody's against me and I need to be the last one standing. Just having a little chalkboard of Xing off the enemies and haha, that feels good. People have actually redefined the horror of killing to make it their pleasure. People can mess up their circuitry with these false beliefs and false lifestyles. But yeah, all of these things make so much sense. So I think that's about all I wanted to say, that have fun. Have fun. The way to take charge of your life is just understand the principles of metaphor. Understand that there's a negative and a positive version of everything. Understand that you have your own path of truth, your own way to individuate. Understand that it is sacred and beautiful and divine. It goes somewhere. Anybody and any beliefs that say you're going to die, you can't make it on your own, they're not true. Validate yourself. Do journaling, do art, do what make good new friends, whatever helps you to be more of you. That you will open up the universe, and you will discover an amazing eternal life of abundance once you get past the false negative belief systems. So that's what I had fun with this new parable, and the spiritual tears. I wept a lot because you connect with the feelings. Life is like empty containers. It's just symbols. What you want to feel is the energy of the higher dimensions and the true nature, the true love of the universe. So that's why you organize forms and representations, and your actions, big or small. What matters is the accuracy and the sincerity, the heart-led authenticity of your choices in life. that the smallest action of love is infinitely more powerful than the biggest, like, brute force, false belief-based actions of dictators and dominators and so on. So manage your life to be meaningful to you. Have fun with the personal mythology and discover that you do have a higher self. You have a universe that loves you, that is guiding you, and you have just a fantastic destiny ahead of you. Thank you. Enjoy.